Welcome into Buckeye Insiders Recruiting Show. Appreciate you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Chuck Milletti. Today, we talk some Ohio State recruiting. We're going to break down some position groups. We're going to talk some overall philosophy changes, in particular, what's going on in this class right here. And I've been talking to a lot of Buckeye fans, recruiting fans over the last few days. A lot of people aren't happy. Recent commitments, recent visits getting canceled. Kasai Curry going to Texas. You lose your backup plan for DGG, Jaden Miles. Kanaz Sullivan, one of the last safeties on the board, cancels his visit. Bryce Woods, one of the four remaining cornerbacks on the board, cancels his visit. Seth Williams, one of the final safety on the board here for Matt Guerrieri, cancels his visit, and he's now down to Clemson and Georgia. And we got a lot to talk about. But an article came out earlier this week about DGG after his Tennessee visit, and his uncle, who he's very, very close to, came with him on every Ohio State visit, kind of speaking for David. You can probably take out of it, as David is very shy. And he gave a long, in-depth article full of quotes to Steve Wiltfong of On3. I did a full episode covering DGG and the whole situation. That dropped over at Chuck on Bucks this morning. If you want to go check that out, we'll hit on it briefly here, but I got a lot of thoughts on it. But let's talk right now about the big board, where we're at. And before we do, I want to first remember what happened last cycle. What happened last cycle is it ended up being another very big class with 27 guys, but that wasn't the intention going in. If you remember exiting the summer official visit season, Ohio State fans by and large were very unhappy. We had just gotten the CSC changes. Ohio State was losing a lot of battles, and it looked like a pretty low number class. Very public battles were being lost, particularly at edge. And for the first time in a long time, Ohio State was sitting, coming out of June, July, and August, outside the top 5, closer to almost outside the top 10, which would have been the first time in Ryan Day's career outside of the transition year. And they looked like they were probably going to add maybe 3 or 4 more guys post-summer visit season. That is not what happened post-summer visit season, but that wasn't always the plan. That changed when the portal rule changed that ended the spring portal. So the spring portal ends, and now Ohio State's faced with a situation where the portal is going to be taking place when they're making a run to a national championship. And should they play in that national championship game, should they play that late, the portal is going to be over before they're even done with their season. And then there's 5 days for everybody on their roster to now go enter the portal. So Ryan Day is looking at this and saying, all right, there's no option to backfill these guys we could potentially lose should we make a national championship run. So he puts out orders to everybody on the staff and says, go get one additional guy. We want to make sure we have enough bodies here. So go get one additional guy. And we saw Ohio State bring in Caden Gephardt. James Laurinaitis brings in Caden Gephardt. Due to the week, by the way, James Laurinaitis brings in Braxton Rembert. Tim Walton brings in number 1 quarterback in the country, Jay Timmons. Carlos Lachlan brings in Legend Bay. Larry Johnson doubles back on Emmanuel Ruffin, who's having a great start to his career at Ohio State. Tyler Bowen brings in Mason Wilhelm, Landry Breed. That's just some of them. There's more. Kamari Bing. Matt Guerrieri brings in Kamari Bing. So remember, as we're looking at this class, that all that stuff happened last year after this time. And I think what that did was open Ohio State's eyes to the fact that they have got a really great scouting department and the ability to look at that senior film and go get guys that they previously would have missed out on because they'd have been full by the end of the official visit season, has got part of the reason that we've seen so few guys coming in for official visits this year, as we're seeing a very targeted official visit crew at every position. We're talking 4 guys week 1 that were uncommitted, 4 guys week 2, 4 guys week 3 that are uncommitted, which looks nothing like years past. And I think a lot of that has to do, this very narrow board, with the fact that they know they can out-scout guys looking at that senior film and go get on guys late and win in the end. And to be honest, I kind of love it. And remember how exciting that was. It feels stressful now. It feels stressful now because we're not used to it. and we just saw it 1 year. But there's another reason for it, another reason why these official visits have been so slim, and that is that previously they weren't talking money, man. They weren't talking money with these guys or their agents until they went through their official visits. It was the last thing they did. Imagine spending all that time recruiting, bringing someone in for a very expensive official visit, whining and dining them, and then at the end, you sit down and you put your numbers across the table and you realize that you are so far apart, there's absolutely no way you guys are going to meet in the middle here. I always thought that was a mistake. I've kind of been railing about it for a couple of years, and finally they've cut that out. Well, as a result, this has knocked off a lot of guys off the board before it even gets to that point of coming in for an official visit, and that's a good thing. Quit wasting the time on the guys that there's no chance with and focus all that effort on the guys that are in and give them all that love, give them all that attention, give them all the extra, the bennies that were being spread out amongst a bunch of guys that were never going to come. And I'm happy that they've made that change, but it's another reason why we're seeing fewer official visits this year. When we look at Ohio State recruiting, we've seen a big change this year that I think makes it advantageous to putting off until senior film evaluations before we see them move on guys. Here's the change we've seen. Take a look back at last year. The first guy committed in the class, Jacob Weatherspoon out of Avon. DB, nickel prospect, blue chip kid, top 200 kid. And guys of that ilk who would be the number 3 DB in Ohio, number 4 DB in Ohio State's class, very valued by a school like North Carolina, right? They're number 1 guy. So we're looking at this situation. It's the first time we're kind of seeing that these kind of guys are now going to get max money, paid like the number 1 dude in their backfield, and Ohio State can't match that money. And we saw that time and time again over the last couple of years. There's a change this year, and I'll give you the example of Munir Lewis, Kalen Bailey. These are guys that aren't those blue chip kids that are lower on Ohio State's board. These are guys that are 3-star kids that normally would be layups even in recent years for Ohio State. And now it's not just the 4-star kids that are getting those big time deals. Whenever Ohio State goes after a prospect, even if it's a 3-star developmental kid, like a Munir Lewis, who I liked his game, edge from brush. Larry Johnson goes after Munir Lewis, offers him, and all of a sudden Louisville's coming with big bucks, and they get him in the class. And that is a difference. So now, what's Ohio State got to do? They've got to play these offers and their interest in these guys as close to the vest for as long as they can. And a lot of times, I think what we're going to see in the future is that leading to either trying to flip these guys later after they've already committed, but Ohio State hasn't really shown interest, because when they show interest, that's when the Wolves come. That's when the Louisvilles and West Virginias and North Carolinas come, and they pounce and they offer these guys a big nugget because they understand how the resources and the attentiveness and everything that goes into the Ohio State scouting department. And if they want them, they're in. So this is something different we've seen. And I think it means Ohio State needs to play this as close to the vest as possible with a lot of these guys and wait till those Raiders fill their classes up, right? They're going to be filled up eventually. Ohio State comes in late and then has to go do this to get their 3 stars to fill up the class. It's a conundrum, man. It's a real conundrum, and it kind of sucks. But anyway, those are the philosophical things that Ohio State has to work with every year as they're pivoting from year to year in how they operate recruiting. And we get to look back and observe. I think it's incredibly interesting. I love following it, and it sure is fun to talk about. I'd love to hear your comments about it in the comments section. I would also love if you would subscribe to our new channel here at Buckeye Insiders. Myself, Tom, Tony, Ross Fulton, sure to bring you the most exciting coverage on all the Buckeye beat, without a doubt. But let's start with the defensive line. And we'll start with Kasai Curry. Kasai Curry from Sierra Canyon, 6'4", 330, monster in the middle, the number 2 defensive tackle in the country. This is one that we were seeing people like Steve Wiltfong and Chad Simmons, give Ohio State RPMs, crystal balls, 6 out of 10 confidence. They think the Buckeyes are leading. I never felt with all these Buckeye recruitments that have gone the right way for Ohio State that this was one Ohio State ever led for. And yeah, he got an absolutely huge deal from Texas to shut down and not take his final official visits to Oregon this weekend, Ohio State the following weekend. But it wasn't just about money. I don't think Ohio State led the recruitment. And honestly, if we look at Ohio State's defensive line class and the thought of adding Kasai Curry and Marcus Facato to David Jacobs and Cowboy Jr., that would be the best defensive line haul in Ohio State history in the modern recruiting era anyway. And if we really thought that that was something that we expected to happen, we were probably kind of had a little pie in the sky dream. Because while it's clear that Ohio State has been investing a lot more money into the defensive line this year, as they should, that might be a little bit of a bridge too far to think now they're just all of a sudden going to put together the best defensive line class in school history. Nonetheless, they've still got David Jacobs committed. They've got Wyatt Smith committed, and Wyatt Smith, to me, is going to finish this cycle as a 5-star after everybody else sees his senior film. When we look at the trajectory of his career, only getting better, bigger, and stronger, tests off the charts when it comes to athleticism, and everything about him is just points to not just 5-star, but that's like potential future first rounder. So I'm so amped about him and DJ on the edge. But when we talk about missing out on Kasai Curry, it's a big one. Not so much that you missed out on Kasai, which is big, but you only got one backup plan right now, and that's Carlos May. Carlos May, the only guy left on the board, coming in for an official, scheduled for the final week, 6'1.5", maybe 6'1", 330 pounds, 4-star, top 200 kid, runs track, very talented, very cool kid. But he's probably going to Auburn, a kid from Alabama who's been on Auburn's campus 7 times. And Ohio State had a lot of other guys, not months ago, but just in the last few weeks that have dropped off the board that also fit that mold of that big body in the middle. Nate Kamba out of North Carolina, and John Archer out of North Carolina, David Fullarunshu, Braden Parks out of Chicago, Waylon Wooten out of Georgia. All these guys Ohio State has recently parted ways with, or they've committed elsewhere. And all of those guys, every single one of them, were scheduled at one point for an official to Ohio State. None of those will happen, leaving just Carlos May as the only current option. And to me, that looks like a bit of an error, putting all your eggs in that basket of Kasai Curry or Carlos May. But I got to remember and tell myself, last year, same thing happened at a lot of different positions. And then we saw them go find somebody later on. And I ended up loving the guy that they brought in. So there's somebody out there that we likely don't know. The deal is with defensive tackle, I think this is much harder to do because these body types are so much more rare that it's not as likely for them to pop as it is for a guy like a Kamari Bing at safety. So time will tell there, but going to be exciting to listen. When we look at this defensive line, I'm now hearing people say, we don't need interior guys. You got 5 for 5 coming. You got 3 freshmen that you really liked. Edric Houston could potentially be back for a 5th year. And in my opinion, if you got a guy like an Edric Houston coming back for a 5th year, that's a guy that I hope loses his starting spot to somebody who is better. Because if Edric Houston's sticking around for year number 5, then things didn't go right for Edric Houston. And while I like Damari Simeon a lot, and I like Emmanuel Ruffin, and I like Jameer Perez, none of these guys was a top 200 kid. None of them was a top 20 defensive tackle. And if we go back the last 4 Ohio State recruiting classes, Ohio State's hit rate in 10 dudes who were either interior prospects or outside prospects, and Jason Moore and Edric Houston who were brought inside, the hit rate is 40%. So it's pretty far-fetched to think that all 3 of those guys from last year are going to be hits. And you lost your entire 3-man interior class in 2025. So you need some interior dudes. Is Marcus Facatuo that guy? Well, Marcus while his body certainly says yes, he's got his weight down to 260. He's fighting hard to be an edge. Texas currently saying he can be an edge. La'Allen Clark is recruiting him hard. La'Allen is the edge coach at Texas, and he's playing on the fact that Marcus's family loves Larry Johnson, and he's Larry's protege. Georgia, the other school of the three that I think are tops on Marcus's board, is recruiting him to be an outside linebacker because, look, they're feeding him a line of BS. They know that his body can't stay light enough to stay there, but they're telling him what he wants to hear, and that's fine, whatever. Ohio State knows what this guy's going to be. It wouldn't be the first time you had a guy come into Ohio State thinking he wanted to be an edge and realized once he got a little bigger because he couldn't hold his weight down that it was just better for him to move inside. We just saw it with Edric Houston, and we'll see that with Marcus wherever he goes. But right now, Marcus really dead set on playing the edge, so much so that at 6'7", with a massive frame and huge thighs, the kid's trying to cut weight before his senior year. And he's all proud of himself that he's got down to 260. Now, we all feel good when we lose a few pounds of chub, but I really don't like the way he's going here. Nonetheless, Ohio State looking great on the exterior. Also has Chris Whitehead coming in. Chris Whitehead, a top 10 edge. His official visit's still scheduled. I don't think there's any way he signs at Ohio State, and that would just be too much money in one particular position when you just came out of last class with Kari Wilder, who I think is unbelievable, and Dre Quinn, who I think has a really big future. Guy is a prototype. So that's on top of Zion Grady and Epi Sataniway. Like you're loaded now at edge. Chris Whitehead, this visit doesn't even need to happen as far as I'm concerned. But let's move to linebacker with James Laurinaitis landing one of his very top targets earlier in Quentin Cipher. And Quentin Cipher continuing to drop in the rankings. Who cares? James Laurinaitis handpicked him. Then he handpicked Prince Goldsby out of Missouri. And Prince Goldsby is another Braxton Rembert body at 6'5", 200 pounds, who moves like a gazelle, unbelievably quick burst and delivers a blow. Love those prospects. Then you got Kalen Bailey as your third. Kalen Bailey, just a 3-star, but did recently move up from the 1,000th player to the 750th player in the country. And he is an incredibly gifted athlete out of Glenville that I am totally enamored with his game. This kid has got some serious bend at just 6'2", and that's pushing it, 220 pounds, hits like a hammer. I just love his feel for the game. I love his athleticism and his burst. I think he's without a doubt a blue chipper. This is an Ohio State evaluation special right here. No doubt this kid's a blue chipper. And I think it's going in a really positive direction. I do think he ends up in this class. Now, moving on to safety, Ohio State, Matt Guerrieri, bring in 4 safeties last year. The ones they've brought in, you've got Blaine Bradford, who stood out above the rest. And then to me, after Blaine Bradford over the spring, it was Caden Gephardt. Caden Gephardt out of Olentangy, who was the 4th guy they added. Then Simeon Caldwell, who could eventually end up out of position as a safety and need to move down to linebacker. And then Kamari Bing. But you brought in 4, but it really might only be 3 if Simeon Caldwell ends up moving. So Guerrieri once again lands his top-rated target in Eli Johnson in this class. And then you bring in Angelo Smith. And Angelo, who looked like for a minute may end up committing to South Florida, flipping to South Florida. He's one of the only committed guys to take a visit elsewhere. But his official visit kind of cemented his commitment to Ohio State. So he will be coming. But if we're being totally honest, Angelo Smith needs to hit a growth spurt to play at Ohio State. And that may or may not happen. So Ohio State would really like to bring a third in here. And they looked good with Kanaz Sullivan, who is now off the board. Then there was a movement with Seth Williams, also another 6'3" monster out of Georgia, who I really liked, who decommitted from Clemson. Guerrieri gets in on him, no longer coming, so he's out. And now there is no current options that we know of at safety, with just Eli Johnson and Angelo committed, and Eli, the only one that we know is going to play at Ohio State. That's not a place you want to be. So we'll definitely see another safety added. We currently have no idea who that is. At corner, we got a big weekend. Currently no commits at corner. And last week We saw Bryce Woods, one of the remaining 4 targets for Walt, go off the board. And Ohio State welcomed in for their official Jaden Carey out of St. Thomas Aquinas, a 3/4-star kid, depending on where you look. I think out of the 4 targets, he was the 4th ranked guy, but things moving really well with him, looking very good. And in the end, I think he's a Buckeye. Then this weekend, you bring in your 2 local kids in Deontay Malone from Massillon and Monsana Torbert from Princeton. 2 incredible athletes, slightly different. Monsana Torbert is a total burner. Deontay Malone is an all-around freaky athlete, and I think he's an absolute steal. He is the 3rd rated of these guys. I think he's the best of all of them. He would be my number 1 choice. An incredible athlete, both sides of the ball, with the ball in his hands, defending. I think he's awesome. Seen him in person, loved him then, love him even more watching his full season. And Monsana Torbert is now viewed by some as a Michigan potentially getting in here. He's a top 100 kid. No doubt they want him big time. Now, if I had my pick, I'd pick Malone. So I'm happier to hear that it's Torbert with some motion somewhere else than Malone, just because Torbert's a little small, even though he does got incredible speed. But if Walt's able to pull this off with Jaden Carey, Deontay Malone, and Monsana Torbert as a 3-man class, it would be an absolutely huge win. In a class at corner where Ohio State is not investing a lot of money, and rightfully so. Because when you brought in Dominic Kelly in the transfer portal, you essentially made that 2025 class Devin Sanchez and Dominic Kelly. And that was followed by Jay Timmons and Jordan Thomas. There's a number 1 cornerback in each of those classes, and then a highly rated 4-star, all of whom are looking great at Ohio State. So 2 back-to-back sweet cornerback classes. And now you have the opportunity to go dig for some diamonds in the rough in this particular class, save that money and invest it somewhere else. And if Walt is able to come out of this with Jaden Carey, Deontay Malone, Monsana Torbert, he would have done a fantastic job in a year where they aren't spending much money. If he comes out with Jaden Carey and Deontay Malone, I still think he did a good job. But I would certainly love all 3. And Malone, Torbert coming in for their officials. We'll find out coming out of these how it looks. Now let's move over to the offensive line, where I think it is very important to note that Ohio State in the class of 2027 now has the highest rated Ohio State offensive line class of the decade, as Mason Wilt, as predicted at Juck on Bucks a long time ago, is now a 4-star player, a top 200 kid, now that the 247 and Rivals updates have come out. And that means that all 5 of Ohio State's offensive line commits in this class, all 5 of them for Tyler Bowen, are blue chip prospects, 4-star prospects, potentially Kellen Weimer ending up with a 5th star, as he is currently the number 30th ranked prospect in the country at Rivals. If it ended today, you'd have a 5-star and 4 4-stars. That would be fantastic. Now, he's not done, as he is seeking to add another guy, and Caden Moss will be in town this weekend. He would be your 6th dude, a 6th blue chipper out of Mississippi, a guy he's been working hard this whole cycle, and a guy for a Southern guy that really likes Ohio State. I still think this is a Hail Mary, and I don't think it happens. But nonetheless, nice that he was able to get him in. And he will have some backup, as all the other Ohio State offensive linemen that are committed will be in town to try and help him peer recruit Caden Moss to the class. And they'll do a great job with that, as this crew is really a group of kids that's really together, which is awesome to see. So good stuff there from Bowen. And I do think whether or not he lands Caden Moss, he's going to add another guy. And maybe that is Kalel Johnson out of Cincinnati. I would love it if he added Kalel. There is also another scheduled official visit for a 4-star Georgia commit, a top 150 in the country, Kelsey Adams. He's out of Langston Hughes. That's Aaron Nolan's high school, and Jelani Thurman. So things haven't gone good with Ohio State and Langston Hughes recently. His visit scheduled for next weekend. He's also shopping around at North Carolina, Mississippi State, Miami, and LSU. And I don't think there's much there with Ohio State, but we'll see. Always a possibility if they can get him on campus. But any way you slice it, Tyler Bowen did a ridiculously good job in his first full season as an Ohio State coach. This is his first full cycle, fantastic job by Ohio and building out 3 Ohio kids, 1 Pittsburgh kid, 1 Virginia kid. And that is the way you do it. You don't go all around the South, rated 3-star and 4-star kids. You offer twice the prospects, and you concentrate your time and efforts in the Midwest and in the Northeast, just like we've watched Notre Dame do for the last 10 years and pump out nothing but great offensive lines. So he has readdressed the proper strategy for Ohio State on the offensive line. He's done a great job. At tight end, Keenan Bailey's done his best, man. Keenan Bailey, we thought Brody Johnson would finally be the guy. Brody Johnson, a Northwestern commit, that's not going to work out. And there is currently nobody on the board. And I mean nobody. He's being totally squeezed. It's basically go find somebody who will take absolutely bare minimum dollars. And that's tough to do this day and age, man. It is tough to do because guys like that generally aren't worth a darn. And then when you find them, somebody else is in on them. So we're going to see Keenan wait till senior tape. And as long as he can, he's going to hold off on this because as soon as he comes in, all the eyeballs are going to be on him and that guy, and they're going to be coming with offers that Ohio State isn't matching. And they've done a great job in the portal, and he's done a great job in the portal, doing what he did with Will Kazmarek, turning him into a draft pick out of Ohio. And then when we look at Max Williams, Mason Williams, the kid from Ohio University that just came up out of Mogador was voted by the coaching staff as the most surprising transfer. So he's done an excellent job. Nick Lauder, fantastic, looking like a grown man, and really excited about that. I also love Nick, but Keenan's done a great job for what he's been able to work with, which is very little. Moving on to quarterback, the situation with Brady Edmonds, we've talked about extensively. Brady is still currently planning his visit that starts the 17th, and that's a 7-on-7 camp, and then goes through a one-day camp, I think, and then his official visit through the weekend. Brady voiced publicly that he was not feeling the same love from Ohio State that he initially was, and he said that after his official last weekend at UCLA. That was his 3rd trip to UCLA. They really, really want him. They're valuing him, and there's a lot of momentum there with Bob Chesney. It looks like a tempting destination for a kid like Brady from the West Coast at a school that didn't ever really look like an option, and now he said looks like a very real option. But as long as Brady makes it into town, I think Ohio State, and I have thought Ohio State has the ability to turn this relationship around. And I think that they will. And the truth is, I think that they will because they haven't found another option as things aren't working out for them the way they had hoped when they went barnstorming around the country because everybody's already committed and they waited way too long to try to get in on all these guys that are committed with deals, and quarterback deals are the type of deals where we get your name and we get you money quick, and now you're not breaking them, and going to be really difficult to flip a top-tier quarterback. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Buckeyes, in the end, stick with Brady. Brady sticks with the Buckeyes, and my hope is that he comes and makes them right in their initial evaluation, and things work out really well here because that dude deserves it. He is a Buckeye through and through. He's one of us. Then we move to Cortez Hankton's first wide receiver class, which I don't judge any coach, similar to Bowen, until they go through their first full cycle. This was not Cortez Hankton's first full cycle. Cortez Hankton walks in the door as a guy who's picking up somebody else's board, and then he's got to tweak from there. A couple of weeks ago, Benny Easter came and visited, and there was a lot of buzz about Ohio State and Benny Easter. I wasn't buying any of it, not a flipping word. I don't think there's any way Benny Easter ends in this class, and I don't know if you've noticed, but that's gotten really quiet on that front. I still don't think there's anything to it. And this week, you welcome in Monchon Sales, the number 1 wide receiver in the country. And he's coming out of respect as he has a relationship with Day and Ohio State, and he's right next door in Indiana, and knows Hankton from LSU. But he's not coming to Ohio State. He's going to Indiana or Alabama, as Ohio State is not going to be spending heavy on him this year. It would cost a ton of money. They've got money tied up in Jameer Brown. Now, Jameer, the local kid, love Jameer, fastest player in the state of Ohio, sets the record in the 100 and 200 meter having a great track season. He's had a really average camp season, 7-on-7 season. He's not done a lot. He's not looking very refined as a wide receiver, and he's looking like a guy who's got some developing to do once he comes to campus. This is not going to be a guy who steps onto campus and starts producing immediately and wows everybody like we've seen a couple of freshmen do recently. That's not happening. It could happen depending on how they use him, but it won't happen with wide receiver play. There's ways you can use Jahmyr to get the ball in his hands and you can see some electricity because he isn't just fast. He's got quick hips, quick acceleration, obviously, great moves, and a little bit of physicality to him. I watched him from the 20-yard line last year against Pick Central, take it in from a Wildcat and steamroll a safety at the goal line. He's a physical kid too. But as far as a refined wide receiver, a Brock Boyd, a Blake Wong, that isn't him. He's got a ways to go. But when it comes to Monshun Sales, it's Alabama or Indiana, and Ohio State's not matching. It would be great if you could have Monshun Sales with Brock Boyd, with Chris Henry Jr. and Jaquaden Guilford. That would be crazy. But Cortez Hankton would need to win that with less money, and Cortez Hankton, in his 10-year career, has never landed a wide receiver of Monshun Sales ilk. And at LSU, the previous 4 years, he only landed one top 100 wide receiver. So the Monshun Sales thing has absolutely zero chance. And when we look at this wide receiver crew, no Benny Easter, in my opinion, no Monshun Sales, in my opinion. I think it's most likely that it does land Blake Wong, who I love, and I've had predicted in my mock class and wanted in this class for a very long time. I think that's a great addition, and I'm very happy that of Hartline's board, that's one of the guys he targeted and said, okay, we're going to stick with this recruitment. So a big kudos to Cortez Hankton for sticking with that one. And now recently he's found out of Florida, Jordan Donahue, a kid ranked in the 1000s, but at 6'5" with soft hands, not incredibly fast, doesn't high point the ball great, but he has really good body control. I'd love to see him at Ohio State as a fourth wide receiver in a class, but it's kind of looking right now like this could finish Jahmyr Brown, Blake Wong, and Jordan Donahue. And when we look at that, Jahmyr Brown, not a guy that Cortez Hankton brought in. And I'm sorry, I just don't give you a ton of credit for holding on to the kid with the Block O tattooed on his forearm, who moves closer to Columbus, transfers high schools to move closer to Columbus, is very shy, and was always going to be a Buckeye, always. So basically, he would have brought in Blake Wong and Jordan Donahue in that scenario, and that would be, not too awfully impressive. Not too awfully impressive. Nonetheless, I like both the players. I would prefer if there was one more guy in there that was a dude that was on the Blake Wong level, and we'll see if maybe that can happen again. We saw a lot of movement after August last year, so we'll let the process play out. But really, it's not fair to judge any of these guys until their first full class, and that won't come till this time next year with Hankton. And then we go to running back, which is without a doubt the biggest conversation piece of the year. Carlos Loughlin, it was not his decision alone to operate this way here when it comes to David Gabriel George. And the way Ohio State have operated is they, over the last 2 years, have let a lot of really talented backs fall by the wayside in their pursuit of David Gabriel George. All their eggs in the DGG basket. They brought in Jaden Miles for an official. He was the only other running back. That was just last weekend. The kid was interested in Ohio State. They said, I'm sorry, we need to hear from DGG. And he says, well, screw it then. I'm committing to Florida State, which he did immediately upon leaving. And now we're going to have this Ohio State-Tennessee battle to the finish for DGG. Now, recently we heard from his uncle. He had some things to say. Again, I did a whole show about this at Juck on Bucks. If you want to see that whole breakdown, go check it out. But the bottom line is this. Ohio State has always known that David Gabriel George is going to be a very expensive prospect. No doubt about it. And when they decided to jump into the deep end with a prospect like David Gabriel George, they were prepared to pay big time. This is a generational type prospect now. This is a different type of dude. This is not even Quinshawn. This is not even Travion. Those guys were second round picks. This is viewed currently as, people who evaluate these type of guys. And I would say I agree, and you probably would too, as a first round difference making type of back, a Saquon, a Jeremiah Love, etc. Guys that we have seen just be on a totally different level. And when you look at a guy like that, who can potentially take a national championship contending team and make it into a national championship winning team, and as a fan base, you and I, we've seen this twice. We've seen it with Maurice Clarett. We've seen it with Jeremiah Smith. If you think he's one of those guys, and you're going to be spending $40 million on your roster and $15 million on your coaches pool, that's $55 million. If you think this dude is good enough to take you from national championship contender to over the hump, is it worth it taking that $55 million and spending $58 million for a national championship? How much is a national championship worth? It's worth a whole hell of a lot. I think looking back at Jeremiah's freshman year, as much as they paid him his freshman year, he was probably worth 5 times that amount of money. So looking at all that, looking at DGG and the expected salary that's been offered from Tennessee, which is roughly $5 to $7 million over 3 years, $2-ish million a year. Can Ohio State compete with that? Absolutely they can. Will they? Let's keep in mind, this is a rare talent like Jeremiah. Not just rare in his talent, but rare in his work ethic. Just squatted 600 pounds. This is Saquon Barkley all over again. Squatted 600 pounds, which tells us what his work ethic is like, which is what's marveled the Ohio State staff about Jeremiah since he walked in. And he's got an almost eerily similar personality to Jeremiah. Everything about him. He wows on the field. He wows in the gym. And remember, when we talk about you don't want to overpay someone coming in because then you're going to upset the apple cart. Everybody has always said, even people who have that standpoint, it's different when you're talking about a Jeremiah Smith. Okay, it is. And this dude is now in that same category to them, clearly by the way they've acted. So that argument goes out the window. The argument is, are they going to be willing to pay him what it's going to take to win this recruitment? I think that they're going to do it because I can't see any way that they didn't see this going this direction in the end. And they have turned away so many good backs and not pursued so many good backs over the course of the last 2 years that I just don't believe they're going to lose this. But boy, if they do, if they do, I don't even want to think about it. Now, if you want to hear more about those uncle's quotes, you could check that out on that other show. I took them to mean maybe something a little bit different than some other people. But anyway, that is our recruiting roundup of the day as we head into official visit weekend number 3. I certainly appreciate you guys for joining us here at Buckeye Insiders. And we'll try to do maybe one of these every week. Appreciate you guys. Please do subscribe to the show. Just helps you find our new stuff easier, helps us tremendously on this side. And our website should be on and popping in about another week, where you can find all our articles, pictures, and everything else we're planning on doing. And we appreciate you so much. And we'll talk to you soon. I'm Chuck Milletti. Have a good one.